Capitol Report is a production of Senate Media Services.
On this week's program, we'll learn how Minnesota's economy is faring and its outlook into the future. I'll also talk with two new healthcare committee chairs ramping up for the 2017 session. Stay tuned for this and more on this week's Capitol Report. Welcome to this week's program. I'm Shannon Loehrke. Late last week, the press and other interested observers eagerly gathered for the unveiling of the November budget and economic forecast.
And I'm pleased to tell you that we continue to project a positive balance for the remainder of this biennium and for the next biennium. The forecast balance for the next biennium, 2018-2019, is $1.4 billion. We believe that this budget forecast reflects the result of sound fiscal management year after year. This forecast may sound boring to you all, but trust me, in this case, boring is good. Because boring today means our budget remains stable and structurally balanced. Let me demonstrate this. This forecast is our 7th in a row with a balanced budget. And we are again forecasting budget balance for the next 2 biennia. But let's talk about what this forecast does and what it does not do. One thing that this forecast does is look at the state as a whole. And as a state, Minnesota is doing well. Many states would envy this budget forecast today. What this forecast does not do, however, is show the disparities that still exist throughout our state. Across Minnesota, we see disparities in education opportunities, healthcare access, and jobs.
The November budget and economic forecast was released to the public last week, projecting a $1.4 billion surplus through the upcoming biennium. Joining me now in the studio to talk about what that means for the state of Minnesota is State Economist Dr. Laura Kalambokidis. Welcome.
Thank you.
So how is Minnesota's economy faring at present?
Minnesota's economy is doing okay. We've had a long economic expansion, and well into that expansion, Minnesota's labor market is still adding jobs at a fairly reasonable pace. And for the most part, those additions to jobs have been broad-based, so across a wide range of industries.
And how reliable is the forecast? This forecast goes through 2019?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and how reliable is that?
So the official budget forecast goes through 2019, but we actually, in this forecast, we have to do forecast planning estimates out to 2021.
Okay.
So it goes quite a ways out with the planning estimates. So that adds an element of risk, of course, that we're planning so far out that even for the next biennium, the 18-19 biennium, that biennium hasn't even started. And so that's the one that the legislature is going to be budgeting to. And so we haven't even collected any of the revenues for that. So there's risk to this forecast, partly because of the length out, how far out we're forecasting.
Well, and in the documents that were released with the press conference and everything, it said that the forecast does not take into account the results of the 2016 election. So with President-elect Trump and his administration, how might his policy changes affect the forecast?
Yeah, so that even aside from that, we would have had significant risk in this forecast because of the length of time that we're forecasting.
And
out.
that was calculated in? That risk is calculated in to a certain extent?
The risk of the risk associated with any policy changes of the new administration, that's not calculated.
It's not. Okay, so it's as if nothing were changing.
That's right. So the U.S. Macroeconomic forecast that informed our Minnesota forecast, that was released prior to the election. Mm-hmm. And so it did not take into consideration any possible policy changes that would affect the economy. And so what the forecasters are doing now is looking at those policy proposals, trying to figure out what is likely to be proposed, what's likely to get passed, and then how that's going to affect the U.S. economy. So over the next few months, I expect that those things are going to be incorporated into subsequent U.S. forecasts. But the fact that this was a pre-election forecast that doesn't incorporate those potential changes adds another element of uncertainty and risk to the forecast for a number of sectors, including international trade, immigration, banking, energy, and fiscal policy.
And so then when the February forecast comes out, that will have some of those parameters included, correct?
Yes. I don't know that there will be complete clarity at that point, because at that point the administration will have just taken office. And so to the extent that U.S. forecasters can discern what's likely to happen, hopefully we'll have some clarity, but we aren't likely to know everything.
If I understood you correctly at the press conference, you said that if this forecast holds true, this will mark the longest economic expansion in U.S. history. Is that right?
That's right. If this expansion continues until the middle of 2019, which it is forecast to, then it will be the longest expansion since the 1850s. So it will surpass the longest expansion right now, which is the 1990s.
That is so interesting. You said the economy is slowly growing, and that kind of economy is particularly vulnerable to shocks. What kinds of shocks could really create? I can't think of how to say this.
Disrupt that
yes,
slow
thank
growth.
you.
Right. So the U.S. economy is forecast to grow around 2%, 2.2%, which is lower than the 20-year average prior to the Great Recession. That's been long expected because that's largely due to aging of the population. But when you have growth that's that low, that means that when there's some kind of shock, for instance, a geopolitical shock, a war,
even a trade war, could that?
Something like that if it accelerates and affects global growth. So they're a disaster, a natural disaster, things like that. So these unexpected things that are probably external to the U.S. economy. Those kinds of things can disrupt that growth and can kick the economy into negative territory. And it's just a little easier to kick it into negative territory when growth is slow to begin with.
That does actually make sense. During the press conference, you also said that economic growth is projected to be slower because consumer purchasing will be slower due to millennials delaying major purchases. How does the millennials getting out on their own, how does this affect the budget forecast and the projections, and then changing demographics too?
Yeah. So that effect was part of the explanation for why U.S. real GDP growth was slower in the November outlook than it was in the February outlook. So and what happened was there was a reduction in expectations for real consumer spending, and part of that was due to a slowdown in the pace that the forecasters expect the millennials to move out of their parents' homes, for instance, or separate from one another. During a recession and a slow recovery, people live together, and then when the job market picks up, they separate. And it's been long expected that separation would occur and that people would move out and form their own households, and there's spending involved with that. But now the macro forecasters are thinking that's going to happen a little more slowly. And so the kinds of spending that affects are big things like furniture and appliances.
How big is consumer spending in the economy?
Consumer spending is most of the GDP. So going forward, consumer spending is still expected to be the largest contributor to real GDP. And during the economic expansion, there have been some challenges to business equipment and investment, which is one of the other contributors to real GDP. And so that means that the consumers have really been the champions of this recovery.
And finally, Minnesota has a tight labor market. Currently, there's a strong demand for workers and there's low unemployment. So what does this do to the economy, and what are the projections with that?
Yeah, so it's a simple supply and demand kind of thing, that when demand is high and supply is constricted, that you expect the price of that thing to go up. And so we do expect average wages to go up in this forecast. When When businesses are having trouble finding people to fill positions, then the people who are looking for positions can demand a higher wage, and the people who are in those positions potentially can demand a higher wage. So we do expect average wages per worker to go up in this forecast. Another thing that happens when businesses have trouble finding people to fill positions is that they think about automating some positions or adding some technology that allow the people that they do have to do a little more and be more productive. And that's a solution from the business side. That also contributes to higher wages because those people who are in the positions that are using that technology, they're more productive, and so their wages can be higher.
Dr. Kalambokidis, that's all the time we have for today, but thank you for coming. I love talking about the economy with you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Following the budget forecast, Governor Mark Dayton and legislative leaders offered their responses.
6 years ago, the November forecast with which I took office, the projection was for a $6.2 billion deficit in the next biennium. We owed $2 billion to our schools, and there are numerous other shifts and gimmicks woven into the budget. Now we have a projected $1.4 billion surplus for the next biennium. We owe nothing to the schools. $1.9 billion parked in the budgeted reserve fund. And it's just a remarkable change from chronic deficits to a secure budget, fiscal integrity for the state, honest budgeting, and the like.
Today there is a budget surplus again in the state's budget, but Minnesota families aren't feeling that same benefit in their own family budgets. And unfortunately, the governor's policies over the last couple of years have actually taken more money out of Minnesota family pockets by way of higher health insurance costs and higher taxes. And I think we really have an opportunity to focus on Minnesota families. And if you look at where we get our money, it comes from income tax and sales tax. And if Minnesotans are making more money, they'll have more money to spend, and we will have more revenue coming into the state. And I think we just have our focus in the wrong place in St. Paul. It needs to be on Minnesota families.
The budget forecast is pretty much what we all thought it would be, plus or minus a little bit, that it really was about where we thought it would be. And I appreciate that the speaker talked about some of the things that we're going to do. We're going to fulfill promises that we made. Number one in the Senate as well is going to be to fix the healthcare crisis. It is truly a crisis in many places, and if we do nothing about that, we will not have fulfilled a promise that we meant to keep. Because of the surplus that we have, I believe that we will find a comprehensive transportation bill that provides permanent funding long term. I think you'll see that. But I don't think we should forget that if you look at spending moving forward, it looks to be growing into the future, somewhere around 7% government spending. And that means that we really should be looking at each part of government from the bottom up. Are we spending the money the way we should be spending the money? This is the taxpayers' money, and I want to make sure that we use it wisely. So I'm thankful that we have a surplus. We're going to focus on some key issues that we talked about all along. The third one is tax relief. If we get some of that done in special session, that's a win for Minnesota. If we pass healthcare relief, an emergency package in the short term with the idea that we're going to do something else immediately once we take over in January, that's still a win for Minnesota.
In the midst of the uncertainty and turmoil surrounding healthcare policy, Senate Republicans are highlighting its importance with the announcement of a new three-committee structure devoted to policy and reform. Joining me now in the studio is the chair of the new policy committee focused on aging and long-term care, Senator Karin Housley. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Shannon. I'm excited to be here with you.
This policy committee already exists in the House. What prompted the Senate to add it on this side?
I really begged for it, and I shouldn't say that, but I really did. I knew they had it in the House for all of these years, and we didn't have it on the Senate side. And once we took the majority in November, starting in January, I called Senator Gazelka and said, could we please niche out a committee for aging and long-term care, because it is such an important issue in this state. And we didn't have a specific committee that addressed it before. And there are so many issues that need to go through this committee that we do need to focus on with our aging community growing every single year, that I begged.
And you got it.
And I got it. And then I said, oh, and by the way, can I be the chair? So he agreed. So and the whole leadership committee agreed. So I'm very excited about it.
Well, and in introducing this committee, Senator Gazelka said that you'll bring care and compassion to this work. So what in particular interests you, and what policy ideas do you have?
It has this issue of long-term care and aging, and it's going to happen to all of us, but in particular, over the last 5 years, my parents moved into that category, and we had to move them into assisted living. My mom has Alzheimer's. My dad had heart disease, and so they moved into one of the assisted living facilities. And being the end user, because with the dementia and the Alzheimer's and my dad's heart disease, I was the main caregiver before then. And so to navigate through all of that and the different types of facilities, a nursing home, assisted living, or in-home care, all of that, and the
There's
cost.
a lot of options.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that's what really got me interested. And I felt that we needed to make it simpler for the end user too. And a lot has happened in the last 5 years in long-term care and assisted living. But that's where my interest stemmed from. And now my father passed away a year ago, but my mother is still living in and she's great. But just seeing the workers in these facilities, the nurses, the turnover, the amazing job that they do, and the help that they really, really do need in these homes. So that's some of my ideas, or one of them is how do we increase the work shortage that we have in this particular industry?
Well, and it was a question I was going to do later, but let's do it now. Minnesota already has a tight labor market. So how can we ensure the future supply of long-term care workers, nurses, home health aides, as you mentioned? Do you have some ideas about how we can keep that pool growing and stable?
And one of the really hard things, and this is in talking to all of the nurses and the LPNs and the CAs in the industry, the pay. You know, it is really, really difficult to, and we have made some changes in that area, but you will have a hospital attached to an assisted living home, and at first chance, the nurse from the assisted living will move over to the hospital because they can make more money. And so I think we really do have to address that, and to keep those people working there, and then to really open up the career opportunities for our youth, and maybe have grants or programs that have been proven to be successful, to introduce this field to the younger kids, that this is something that they could go into.
So this problem is going to continue to grow, because people 65 and older will be 1/5 of our population by 2030. And people at this point in their lives often have chronic diseases, which means increased health care costs. What can we do to ensure that there's enough funding available to help pay so much of these costs into the future?
And that's the thing that Minnesotans are addressing now. Every single year, 60,000 people, the size of the city of Woodbury, are turning 65. So it's a large group of people which are going to have all of these issues going forward. The longer we can keep these people in their homes, the less expensive it is. So if we could get some innovative ideas with technology to try, or Meals on Wheels, or more deliverable in-home services for these people, that is the least expensive route to address this. But then going forward, we are going to have to find some efficient ways to address the financial situation.
One of the efficiencies I've heard about is this emerging field of palliative care. And yes, I think it was just yesterday, some advocates for that type of care spoke before the Legislative Healthcare Workforce Commission. Do you have any thoughts on this kind of care that makes people comfortable but doesn't necessarily try to cure their diseases as they age?
And I think that's something that is really important for us to talk with our own children and to talk to our parents about, and what do they want for their quality of life, end of life care to be. I don't have any specific solutions to it, but it's something that we really, really need to address and talk about, and I think the Aging and Long-Term Care Committee would be a perfect place to do that, to hash out some of those things.
And one last thing before we go. There have been several stories in the news lately of elder neglect and abuse. Is this something that will fall under the purview of your committee?
I hope so, because that's another issue that I've seen happen over the last 5 years in the situation, and also taking advantage of vulnerable adults, exploitation.
Financially.
Yes. It's near and dear to me, and I really do hope those issues come through my committee, because those need to be addressed.
Senator Housley, I can see your passion, and I really look forward to the reading and seeing the work of your committee. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you. Have me back.
I will.
Thank you.
With the Republican Party assuming a 34-33 majority in the Senate, the caucus recently announced a restructuring of healthcare committees. Joining me now in the studio is the newly appointed chair of the Human Services Reform, Finance, and Policy Committee, Senator Jim Abeler. Welcome.
Oh, it's great to be here again. Thank you.
You and I are both relatively new to the Senate. You started in February.
Yeah.
You came in the minority party. Now you're in the majority party, and you're the chair of a healthcare committee. So as a trained chiropractor, can you treat yourself for whiplash?
They say the person who has himself for a patient, no, who said, well, I screwed it up. Anyway, they have a fool for a patient if you treat yourself. So you need somebody to help you out.
It's been a quick change, though.
Yes.
Is it exciting for you?
Oh, very. It's there's so many opportunities, and I never thought I'd be a chairman again, frankly. And then it just lands on us all of a sudden. I woke up in the morning like, what? Wow, we're in charge? Holy cow.
Mm-hmm. So political thinkers have pointed to problems with the Affordable Care Act as one of the reasons why the Republicans had such big wins, even nationally, in this last election. You came on this program not long ago to talk about some of your ideas for health care reform. And now, as chair of your committee, can you talk about your committee and some of your ideas for reform?
Well, there's actually two committees related to the whole healthcare thing. There's the disability services and county services part, and then there's the healthcare part. I'm actually in charge of the disability side. Okay. But all the interest and action, there's a lot of work to do, and we need to care for our vulnerable people and all that, and that's probably a different show. But there's a lot of interest in the healthcare side, and that's the marquee topic. And if that committee sneezes, it's going to be in the paper. Mm-hmm. And frankly, I think it wasn't even the brokenness that happened with the whole Obamacare thing. It was the failure of people to say, we didn't mean that. Oops, we can try to restore it. And so it became political, and so here we are with Minnesota's amazingly strong healthcare system is fracturing. We just lost Medica as a Medicaid provider. They're going to quit in May. And
right,
rates
and 300,000 people are going to be looking for new. And
people's rates have gone up 50 to 100% if you're buying your own policy. They didn't do anything wrong, and people are like, what? Mm-hmm. So it's an area that's going to take a lot of work and be really interesting to work in. Time to go back to restore Minnesota's greatness in the healthcare world.
So to just talk about your committee, though, because you said your committee is going to be focused on sex offenders, disabled. What are some things that you're looking at to try to do in that area? The key,
particularly in the people with disabilities and seniors and childcare, if you focus on the client or the person being served as opposed to who serves them, you can actually do a lot of good changes. And so we're going to step back and take a whole look at the whole panorama. How many people are we serving? How would we like to do it if we could? And let's move toward that. And what we have now is just a random collage. And we add programs and add programs. In your house, if you never clean out your fridge, you'd have to buy another fridge. Or you could go to your regular fridge, since things are falling out when you open the door, and take the 2 pickle jars and pour them together. Now you have 1 pickle jar, and you can get rid of the other empty one, and actually you just have as many pickles, and now it fits better. And sometimes the programming reforms can be as simple as that. But very often the vendors and the nice people who provide services control how we do it. And it has to be about the clients. because it's very expensive and the services are not as good as they might be, and the experience for the person with a disability or the senior is not what we want it to be. And that's my focus, and it's exciting to get to dig into that.
So let's talk a little bit about MNsure.
Yeah.
You have said that because it is an exchange and Minnesota has its own exchange, you'd like to keep it local. Other members of your party have talked about wanting to dismantle it or go to the federal exchange, and obviously things may change a lot. But is there controversy in your party on that MNsure topic? Because you seem to be a little different.
A little controversy. It's the third rail. And you know, the people that made it up, they had to believe in it with the faith of a religion, and we thought it was horrible, and it was not very good. If the choice is having our own or having a federal one, I don't trust the feds. Even now with the changeover, I don't know what they're going to tell us, and California and Minnesota are different.
Well,
So
Minnesota has that history of actually serving its people well.
They're actually leading. So how about if they did what we do? Let's import good ideas. And so if we're going to have an exchange, let's have a Minnesota one that we can improve. Now we can actually do something about it. But you know, the secret is we never needed one in the first place. We have these people in Minnesota called insurance agents. If they could have lined up the subsidies with the people, you could have saved $400 million. But that's water over the dam, so looking forward, it has to work. And it still is. It's just, MNsure is just a store. It's just a store to buy insurance at. It's not a very good store. If there were other stores, you wouldn't go there. But to get the subsidies, you have to go there, and they work with the public programs. And so I think it can be made to work, which is what I'm about.
One thing I want to talk about is the conversation seems to be about healthcare premiums and the cost of insurance. But what about the cost of healthcare anyway? It seems that nobody knows how much anything costs. For example, if you break your arm and you go to this hospital, it'll be $500. If you go to this hospital, it'll be $1,000. And if you go to a different hospital and you're uninsured, it's $2,500. So how do we know how much anything costs?
Well, we don't. In the past, I've done some work with people posting prices, but you never know all the things you have to buy. For the regular individual, they have insurance, they go, what's it cost? $50. The $50 was $500, was $1,000. Nobody cares. And so they need to care. And when it's $50, they're like, well, we'll do everything. Yeah, I would like everything done for my arm that I could possibly. I want the colored cast, and I wanted to kind of have this little special thing. If you were paying for it, you go like, I think a white cast is fine, and I'll put a little sleeve on it. And so there are some things you can control and some things you can't control. If you're very ill, you're going to spend a lot of money. But even those folks have some choices. But once you're past deductible, it's 100% paid, nobody cares. It really matters in the cost. And so, as you suggest, transparency and letting people know in a meaningful way, do you know what you just spent? Would you have spent $30,000 for those 2 days in the hospital? No, I would not have. If I would have known, I would have stayed home. And so get the care you need, but people need to know. And that's where the costs lie, and in even better ways. More conservative care. What if we tried something conservative rather than going right away to surgery? What an idea. Well, it only costs $50. Yeah, give me the surgery, you know? Exactly.
Well, Senator Abeler, that's all the time we have today, but I want to thank you for coming on. You're such a fun guest, and I wish you well in the next session.
And encourage people to know it's their government. When they weigh in with us, it really does matter, especially on these marquee topics about disability services and health care. So
reach out to your senator.
Absolutely, we care.
Join us again next week as we delve into more topics affecting Minnesotans. I'm Shannon Loehrke, and on behalf of all of us at Senate Media Services, thanks for watching.